What if I told you that the great cathedrals of Europe were built by ghosts? Don't be so quick to laugh. Today, we're going to prove it using simple mathematics. Our investigation begins in Reims, France. Here stands one of the most incredible structures in the world, the Reims Cathedral. Its majesty staggers the imagination. Stone vaults soar towards the sky, and the facade is adorned with thousands of sculptures, each a masterpiece of art. It is a symphony in stone, frozen in time. The official story tells us that construction of this giant began in 1211, and even more astonishingly, we're told it was erected in just 80 years. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine a world without electricity, without trucks and cranes, without computers for architectural calculations. A world where the only power source was horses, and the primary tools were a hammer and chisel. In such conditions, could you build a masterpiece like this in just 80 years? Or even in 2 centuries? The very question seems absurd. We are asked to believe that the art of construction was perfected from the very beginning, while all other aspects of life remained primitive. But the mystery of Reims Cathedral is not an isolated case. It's merely the tip of the iceberg, the first thread in a web that leads to far stranger and more inconvenient patterns for historians. These colossal structures stand all over the world, like silent rebukes to our modern age. We, with our technological progress, supposedly 800 years ahead, look at them and cannot understand the most basic thing. How? How could people living in an era we call the Dark Ages achieve such mathematical precision and engineering perfection? Every stone is fitted with flawless accuracy. Every vault calculated to withstand immense pressure for centuries. This requires not just skill, but profound knowledge of geometry, physics, and material strength. Disciplines that, we are assured, were in their infancy at the time. We are told stories of primitive people writing with quills by candlelight, living in cold huts and fighting with swords. Yet somehow, in a parallel reality, they were erecting buildings whose complexity challenges even modern engineers. And they did all of this in record time, often faster than many modern skyscrapers are built today. Let's move beyond pure admiration and ask some simple, practical questions. The construction of such a cathedral is first and foremost a matter of logistics. Millions of tons of stone had to be quarried somewhere. Where were these quarries? How were the stone blocks shaped with such precision without machines? But most importantly, how were they transported to the construction site? Without a network of railways, without powerful trucks, moving even a single multi-ton block becomes a monumental operation, and hundreds of thousands of them were needed. Historical chronicles are deafeningly silent on these details. There are no records of massive transport routes, of the thousands of workers who needed to be fed, clothed, and housed. History asks us to believe that a civilization lacking basic technologies could, out of nowhere, create logistical chains rivaling modern ones in complexity. This paradox is too great to ignore, and it repeats itself from cathedral to cathedral, from castle to castle, all across Europe. History simply throws dates at us, and we are expected to accept them on faith. But what if these dates are just an attempt to fit inexplicable artifacts into a convenient but fabricated timeline? What if the Reims Cathedral and similar structures are not products of their time, but the legacy of something much greater? This thought seems incredible at first, but the deeper we delve into the details, the more inconsistencies we find. The official version cracks under the weight of basic logic. The mystery of the cathedral is not just a question of construction technology. It is a question about the very nature of our history and what might have been hidden from us. And to get closer to the answer, we need to look at other strange patterns that accompany the history of these ancient buildings. There is one suspicious template that repeats so often it can no longer be considered a coincidence. This pattern involves fire and destruction, and it may be the key to understanding what really happened. And this key is hidden in one strange, obsessively recurring story: the story of fire. After analyzing the chronicles of hundreds of ancient buildings, we uncover a disturbing pattern. For nearly every great stone cathedral, there is a legend that it was built on the site of an older, humbler wooden church that was destroyed in a blaze. Reims Cathedral is no exception. We are told it was built on the ashes of its predecessor, which burned down just a year before the new construction began. This scenario repeats dozens, if not hundreds of times across Europe. Stone giants that can withstand the ages somehow constantly rise from the ashes. Isn't that a little too convenient? It feels like a pre-written template, a universal explanation inserted into any historical account to fill the gaping voids. Why would a stone building, capable of surviving for a millennium, need such a fiery backstory? This narrative device solves several problems for the official timeline. It explains why a massive construction project suddenly began on that spot, and it creates an illusion of continuity, linking an inexplicable masterpiece to an earlier, more primitive period. But from the standpoint of mathematical probability, such a number of random yet fateful fires, immediately followed by a construction boom, looks like an outright fabrication. But if the fire stories are just a facade, then who were the people we are told were the creators of these masterpieces? Official history names the architect of Reims Cathedral as Jean d'Orbais. But as soon as we try to learn more about this man, we hit a brick wall. Who was he? Where did he get his knowledge, which was clearly centuries ahead of his time? Where are his blueprints, his calculations, his architectural school, his students? None of it exists. His biography is a collection of vague assumptions and references to other projects, which only deepens the confusion. For example, he is credited with participating in the construction of buildings that were supposedly founded back in the 6th century. Then, 600 years later, he begins the construction of other churches. This creates the image not of a real person, but of a mythical character whose name was simply written into history to give authorship to an anonymous masterpiece. A logical question arises: did he build it at all? Or did he simply find it, and his name, as a figure from a later and more understandable era, was attached to the ancient structure to somehow integrate it into the new timeline? Such phantom architects, whose existence is supported by virtually no real evidence other than the buildings themselves, are found throughout history. This is another crack in the foundation of the official version. So, a disturbing picture emerges. Buildings that are technologically inexplicable, suspiciously frequent stories of fires serving as their backstory, and enigmatic architects whose biographies do not stand up to scrutiny. All of this could be blamed on inaccurate chronicles or lost documents, if not for one thing. All these details are just circumstantial evidence. The real, crushing blow to the official story is not hidden in stone or ancient manuscripts. It's hidden in the numbers. In the very population data provided to us by historians and demographers themselves. There is one area where you cannot lie, one system that cannot be faked in the past, because it obeys strict laws. That is mathematics. Historians can invent any stories they want about fires and genius architects, but there's one thing you can't argue with: mathematics. And now, it will show us a truth that will leave you in shock. The time has come for the decisive experiment. We will set aside legends and assumptions and turn to the impartial language of numbers. Our method is simple and based on official, publicly available data. We will take population growth statistics from a period that is well documented, the last 200 to 250 years. Let's consider England, for example. Since the beginning of the 19th century, its population has grown from 9 million to over 65 million people. This is a colossal leap. We see similar dynamics in other countries. For instance, the population of Spain has increased by almost 20 million people in just the last 70 years. Now, using these growth rates, we will perform a reverse calculation, not into the future, but into the past. We will apply the very same mathematical model to see what the world's population should have been in those so-called Dark Ages. We will use their own numbers, their own mathematics, to check their own history. This simple arithmetic step leads to results that can only be described as a demographic bombshell. They completely shatter the familiar picture of the world that has been painted for us since school. Let's begin our countdown. Applying the recorded rate of population change, we see the numbers begin to shrink at a catastrophic rate. If we rewind time just 100 years from today, to the beginning of the 20th century, the world's population is no longer in the billions. But that's just the start. Moving further back into history, we cross critical thresholds. By 1886, according to our calculations, the entire planet would have had only about 928 million people. By 1817, just over 200 years ago, that figure drops to 314 million. This is already several times less than what official sources tell us, but we continue. By 1748, only 106 million people remain on the entire Earth. Imagine, that's the population of modern-day Japan, spread across all continents. And now, let's take a truly massive step back. The year 1610. According to our mathematical model, based on official growth rates, the world's population at that time would have been just 11.8 million people. That's fewer than live in Moscow alone today. And this is during an era when, we are told, the great geographical discoveries were in full swing, empires were being built, and large-scale wars were being fought. But the most devastating blow from our mathematics lands on the very era with which we began our investigation. We are approaching the 1200s, the time when the foundations of the greatest Gothic cathedrals, including Rhodes, were supposedly being laid. Continuing our calculations with the same relentless logic, we arrive at a shocking, unthinkable result. At the very moment when, according to historians, thousands upon thousands of people across Europe were enthusiastically building stone masterpieces, the entire population of planet Earth would have been about 18,700 people. Let me repeat that. 18,700 people on the entire planet. That is the population of a small provincial town or a modern residential complex. And this is where the official story collides with mathematics and shatters into pieces. We are told that hundreds of architectural marvels were being erected around the world at this time. But who built them? If the entire planet had fewer people than attend a single football match today? Who quarried and moved millions of tons of stone? Who developed the complex architectural plans? Who fed these builders? Mathematics gives a clear answer. It's impossible. The historical version, which claims that a virtually non-existent population was more advanced in construction than we are today, collapses under the pressure of a simple arithmetic calculation. If the people of that time could not have physically built this, then the main and most important question arises: who did? Mathematics has destroyed the alibi of official history. It has shown us that in the 13th century, there was simply no one to build the cathedrals. This conclusion, however shocking, leaves us with only one logical alternative. If these buildings were not built by the people of that time, then they were built by someone else, long before them. The answer, as radical as it may seem, is that we are dealing with the legacy of a previous, far more advanced global civilization. The people of the Middle Ages and subsequent eras did not build these masterpieces from scratch. They found them, inhabited them, and perhaps tried to repair them. Ancient daguerreotypes and photographs from the mid-19th century serve as silent witnesses to this version. In these images, we see the very same medieval cathedrals and ancient temples, but they do not look like new constructions. On the contrary, they are already standing there, ancient, majestic, often half-buried in soil, which speaks of a past cataclysm. Surrounding them is the primitive life of the 19th century. People in simple clothes, horse-drawn carts. The contrast between the technological level of the people in the photos and the architectural perfection of the buildings is staggering. These are not photographs of construction. They are photographs of people reclaiming ruins. We are looking at a world recovering from something global, and these buildings are the silent artifacts of a bygone era, one that would later be called Tartaria or given another name. But if this is the legacy of a single civilization, it must have common features, a recognizable signature left by the real builders. And it does. All over the world, from Europe to Asia, we find the same symbols on the facades of these ancient buildings. One of the most striking examples is the griffin, a mythical creature that official history scatters across different cultures. However, we see its depiction, rendered in a similar style, on buildings separated by thousands of miles. For example, on an old building in Athens, captured in a photograph from the 1860s. These are not random coincidences. This is an architectural language, a unified code that proves these structures had a single cultural source. These symbols are like a signature left by a civilization that was later erased from the history books. We are told stories of disparate, primitive peoples who supposedly arrived at similar architectural solutions independently, but the facts speak to the contrary. Of the existence of a single global culture that possessed technologies we still cannot fully replicate today. All these buildings are links in the same chain, parts of a vast global system that we are not meant to know about. Visual evidence and recurring symbols support our theory, but our most powerful and irrefutable tool is mathematics. It has already shown us that the population in the 1200s was effectively zero, making any large-scale construction impossible. This conclusion alone overturns everything we thought we knew about the past. But if the math is right, it pushes us toward an even more frightening and fundamental conclusion. It points to a point of origin in the recent past, a moment when there were almost no humans on the planet. The thought is both fascinating and terrifying. It means that our current civilization is a very young phenomenon, and all of history before a certain point is either a fabrication or a misinterpreted chronicle of the previous world, the world of the true builders. We are on the verge of a discovery that could change absolutely everything. Our calculation for the 13th century exposed the impossibility of the official version. It was the stone that started an avalanche. But why stop there? If the mathematical model is correct, it should work as we go further, taking us deeper and deeper into the past. We've seen what it was like 800 years ago, but what about 1400 years ago? What lies hidden there, in the depths of time where historians are afraid to look with a calculator in hand? Let's not be afraid. Let's take our mathematical experiment to its logical, however shocking, conclusion. Let's calculate what date this countdown will lead us to, and see what lies at that final point. The answer may be more incredible than any speculation. We have brought our mathematical experiment to a critical point, exposing the absurdity of the official history of the 13th century. But we will not stop. Now we will take the final step and gaze into the abyss that this calculation opens before us. Continuing our countdown with the same relentless rate of population decline, we race back through the centuries. After the mark of 1200 AD, where there were only 18,700 people on Earth, the numbers begin to melt away. The year 1000, 900, 800. With each step into the past, humanity becomes more and more ghostly, its presence on the planet approaching a statistical error. And then, we reach the threshold of the 600s AD. Mathematics, based on official demographic data, delivers its final, merciless verdict. In the year 600 AD, the population of the entire planet Earth would have been 3 people. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. It is the direct and inevitable result of a calculation based on the very numbers that historians themselves provide. We have reached the endpoint, a mathematical zero, beyond which there is nothing. This figure, 3 people on the planet, presents us with a fundamental choice. A fork in the road with 2 paths, each of which completely changes our understanding of the world. The first path is to take this calculation literally. This would mean that humanity as a species appeared sometime in the middle of the 7th century AD. That all of history before that moment, from ancient Rome and Greece to the Egyptian pyramids, is a fiction. This option is so absurd that it can be dismissed immediately, but that leaves us with only the second path. If the math doesn't lie, but its result is absurd, then the initial premise itself must be wrong. We have been assuming that human history is a continuous, smooth process of growth. But what if it's not? What if in the recent past there was a break in this timeline? This calculation means one thing. Very recently in our history, something colossal happened. A global event that almost completely wiped out the planet's population and erased the collective memory of the past. Our mathematical model breaks down because it is trying to look beyond the event horizon of this cataclysm, into the world that existed before it. This idea of a global cataclysm, of a great reset, is the one master key that fits every lock, opening all the doors we have been knocking on. If we assume that such an event occurred relatively recently, for example in the 18th century, around the symbolic date of 1776, then all the inexplicable paradoxes instantly fall into place. The incredible cathedrals and castles? They are not constructions of the Dark Ages, but the surviving heritage of a highly developed pre-cataclysm civilization. The lost construction technologies? They weren't lost in antiquity. They disappeared along with the world of their creators during the reset. The population mystery. The rapid population growth of the 19th and 20th centuries isn't a continuation of an ancient trend, but a demographic explosion of survivors, rebuilding their numbers from nearly zero. And the entire official history that we know is a chronicle written after the disaster. A chronicle designed to explain the new world and to incorporate the incomprehensible ruins of the past, labeling them as primitive medieval buildings and inventing vague legends of phantom builders for them. Therefore, all these cathedrals, castles, and palaces are not the legacy of primitive medieval people. They are the silent witnesses of a world that came before us, a world that was hidden from us. They stand as irrefutable evidence that our civilization is not the first on this planet, and that our history is much shorter and more tragic than we have been led to believe. The numbers and facts are right in front of you. They were always here, just waiting for us to pay attention. This investigation is just beginning. If you want to learn more about what else our history is hiding, subscribe to the channel. It's only going to get more interesting.